We are live.
All right, we are live. Good afternoon, folks. This is the May 14th Town of Dewey Beach Public Hearing and Town Commissioners Meeting. And we'll convene the Commissioners Meeting. And I'll ask you for stand to the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the
to the
flag
flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We could have a moment of silence for seated, moment of silence for all the military personnel out there that are taking care of us and all the people that are suffering from the COVID right now, COVID virus. Thank you very much. We'll do a roll call. I'll read your name off as I see you on my screen here, and then any other people besides Commissioner. Commissioner Persinger.
I am here.
Commissioner Jasinski.
Present.
Commissioner Stevens.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
And Mayor Commissioner Cook is here. We have Ashley Sander, our town clerk. Sheena Gossett, our financial clerk. Bill Zoper, our town manager. Sam Mackert, our police chief. And Fred Townsend, our town attorney. Illustrious Fred Townsend, our town attorney. We've had the opening ceremonies, pledge and roll call. We do the adoption of agenda. Do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda? Motion to adopt by Mr. Stevens, second by Mr. Bauer. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against, say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none. Ashley, was unanimous. Updates and announcements. I have just one update I'd like to talk about. The sidewalk sale is going on in Dewey and Rehoboth this weekend, and I'd like to encourage any people that are interested, please go out and support your local merchants. Anybody else, any other commissioners have any announcements they'd like to make? Anybody else besides the commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move on. Approval of the April 9th, 2021 Town Commission and Public Hearing Minutes. Is there a motion to approve? So moved by Mr. Bauer, seconded by Mr. Persinger. Properly moved and second. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Persinger.
Yeah, I have a suggested change in paragraph 5. It seemed to me that the way what we voted on was described to was a little vague. And I think it would be more accurate to say something like, at the end of this, and to ask the town manager to select and interview consultants and come back to the commissioners with a recommendation. You know, we did not designate a time period, but I think we did ask for a recommendation.
Okay. So you moved to change it to that?
I do.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Any changes, any suggestions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against, say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, Ashley, it's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Persinger, for that correction. We'll go to next to public comment. Ms. Sanders, is there anybody in public comment that would like to get on?
It looks like there's one. We have Jack Dubeck, who's going to be on later, and then John Brady as well. But it looks like David Moskowitz is in the waiting room. I'll bring him in to see if there's public comment from him.
Thank you. Mr. Moskowitz, can you hear us?
Yes.
You're online for your public comment. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. So first off, about the garbage ordinance, the waste ordinance you're going to be discussing. Since you're looking into amending ordinance 153-5, the town should also clean up the language in the ordinance to make it legal. Back when Mayor Cook was on council in 2016 and the town was looking to pass a garbage requirement, I commented that a property owner could be a member of the general public, making it read nonsensical, and the objective was to find someone throwing garbage or like household trash into the garbage. The town should encourage those on the beach who are property owners to use the garbage cans for incidental garbage. And I remember something being done, but it doesn't look like it was for this ordinance. So the commissioners should take what Rehoboth does. And it's two things. One is they use the phrase at the end, except when such person constitutes a member of the general public, which Dewey, for whatever reason, omits that sentence. And then the second thing is Rehoboth also has, for the purpose of this ordinance, each day that a violation occurs shall be deemed to be a separate offense. So while you're actually increasing the price, if you catch someone and you're aware they did it a few times, you can actually give them a ticket for multiple days and not just one day. The second issue I'd like to speak about is the police. For the last 3 years, after the town budget passes, a month or two after, the police will request additional spending. And this shows a lack of any capital or financial planning. More worrisome is existing infrastructure should be prioritized and addressed before buying new toys. Per Dr. Warren, the seasonal police officer radios were in disrepair among other items in need of upgrade. 2 years ago, I commented that the police chief's car at a public meeting, it was from 2004, it should be replaced, but the town never did it. And in last month's town report, it says the car was not safe to drive and they spent a lot of money fixing it. If something would have happened to the chief or the citizen, the town would be liable. So what I'm asking for is the town needs to tell the police, map out all their assets, the police cars, guns, technology, put it on an Excel spreadsheet, when they were acquired, what their useful life is, the actual condition and replacement costs, prioritize them and build a capital plan. I mean, I read these lassos are more like the Wile E. Coyote trying to catch the roadrunner. Maybe they are useful. My concern is there's higher priority assets that need to be addressed first. Our officers should have all their cars and replacements planned out. The police radio system and technology should be 2021, and body cameras, which may or may not be a state requirement in the near future, could cost 30 grand, and there's no fiscal plan. And then my final comment is it's time for the town to start planning a new town hall. Money was previously allocated to the town to hire an engineer to come up with a concept. It would be nice to build a town hall on Route 1 and raise the existing town hall to make it parking, but the town should proceed. Material costs has been going up dramatically. If the town was doing this 2-3 years ago, things would be cheaper and it's only going to get more expensive. Thank you.
All interesting comments. Thank you very much, Mr. Moskowitz. I appreciate it. Ms. Sanders, anybody else?
No, there's not at this time.
Not at this time. All right. Then we'll move on to open the public hearing. I have asked our town attorney, as I usually do during public hearings, to handle the chair side of this event. So I'm handing over the gavel to Mr. Townsend. Mr. Townsend, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor Cook. At this point, I think I'll recognize the town manager, Bill Zoper, to give us some background on the matter before we open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. So reviewing the town's storm drain systems, the engineering firm of Remington and Burdick have been doing that. They came up and ranked certain streets and the storm systems underneath them that need to be repaired. Some of them, the whole pipes will need to be repaired, and some of them just need to be relined. So the decision was made by the infrastructure committee to go ahead and reline a certain street. So those streets are Reed Street, and that is moving basically on Reed Street from what they have numbered as 33, number 33, which is at Route 1 going southbound and Reed Street, down to number 67, which is down near the Inland Bays project that they had. That project right there is to realign that pipe. The other project that was decided was also up on Swedes and Bayard, and that was running on Swede Street from marker 05 to 46, and then also down Bayard to number 10. We had Jim Tyler from the committee chairman from infrastructure went out there with us on April 14th. We had another member from the committee. We walked it with the engineer. We walked both Reed Street, we walked Bayard, and we walked Swedes. He was satisfied with the work that was going to be done when we were going to expend the current funds that are in this resolution. We are currently waiting. They are waiting for us to approve this, and once it's approved, they will start to work. Because it was, we had to wait till this meeting. They will be able to start to work probably until right after Memorial Day, and we'll finish up sometime around June 15th. Any other questions?
Any questions for the town manager or comments from the commissioners? So I'm guessing in advance that there may not be anyone who wishes to speak on the subject, but for the record, Ms. Sander, do we have anyone for our public hearing?
No, there is not.
Perhaps we could start with deliberations and then make one last check in the waiting room before we vote. So do any of the commissioners wish to express their support for this prior to taking a motion? Mr. Mayor?
I fully support this agenda item. It's long overdue. We've had serious problems with our stormwater drain infrastructure. This is not the worst area, but this is the biggest bang for the buck at this moment. The worst area of some of the areas are collapsed, and for the amount of money that we have to spend right now and the amount of time we need to get going on it, this was the best area to reline and reset some of the pipes in that area, and we get the most area for this amount of money at this time. So there are other areas that need to be redone that have collapsed, but that's gonna, once you start digging, you find even more problems, and so we're trying to get, again, the biggest bang for the buck.
Thank you, Mayor Cook. Any other commissioners? Mr. Persinger?
Yeah, I will just say, I think this is a good example of exactly why we have an infrastructure account and why we put aside money each month to fund things like this. We heard a presentation on this a couple of meetings ago. It's a good and appropriate expenditure, and so I'm fully in support of it.
Thank you. Anyone else before we check on the waiting room once more? Nothing further. Ms. Sander, is anyone else in line to be heard from?
No, no one is in the waiting room.
Mr. Cook, I will, I think we can announce oh, Mr. Stevens.
No, I'm sorry. I was going for the motion too soon.
Understood. So, Mr. Cook, at this point, I would suggest that we formally close the public hearing.
And so be it. Unless there's an objection, I'll close the hearing and move on to the next item, which is a discuss and vote item number 1. Discuss and possibly vote to approve a resolution regarding the usage of infrastructure funds for the rehabilitation of stormwater repair work on Bayard Avenue and Reed Avenue as proposed by the engineers Remington Vernick in the amount of $47,727 to cover the proposed cost for the Bayard Avenue repairs and $153,820 to cover the proposed cost for the Reed Avenue repairs. I would suggest we take a motion in order to open the discussion. Motion by
So moved.
Mr. Stevens, seconded by Mr. Bauer. I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens, do you have a motion to?
Yes, I have a motion to approve the funding proposed by engineers Remington and Vernick in the amount of $47,727 to cover the proposed cost of Bayard Avenue repairs and $153,820 to cover the proposed cost of the Reed Avenue repairs.
And Mr. Bauer, you seconded?
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. I jumped a little ahead of myself there. I apologize. Ms. Sanders, you have that down? Okay, is there any discussion? Anybody like to have any discussion at all? Hearing none, I'll call a vote on the item. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against, say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, Ms. Sanders, unanimous. Item number 2, moving on here. discuss and possibly vote to approve an ordinance to amend chapter 80, to amend chapter 80 of the town code by adding a new section 80-13.2 regarding underage possession and consumption of alcoholic beverages. Chief and town manager, I'm going to go to both of you. I'll go to town manager first, and then you can move to the chief. Mr. Zolper, your mic is off. Go ahead.
There.
You just turned your mic off again, Mr. Zolper.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. So the alderman and the chief both came to me and said, hey, you know, the state has changed underage consumption laws and from a criminal violation to a civil violation. They both brought those to me. I talked to Mr. Townsend about that. We decided, talking to the chief, that we best to have Mr. Brady handle this. It's more of a criminal application down to a civil. So we decided to have Mr. Brady do the background work on this and then move forward with the motion that's in front of us today.
Mr. Zolper, would you like to go to Mr. Brady first before we go to the chief, or which one do you want?
Chief first, please.
Chief Stan Mackard, please.
Mr. Mayor, as Mr. Zolper said, the state had changed the underage possession consumption statute from penalties from criminal down to civil. The judge had talked to me in court 36 about the number of violations that we handle and thought it would be a good idea so that these folks, when they go to apply for jobs, wouldn't have a criminal record later on when they applied for jobs, and thought it would be a good idea to get ours in line with the state. That way everything's uniform. Our city ordinances matches the state of Delaware's. So we thought about it. I think it's an excellent idea. And I talked to Mr. Zolper, and that's why Mr. Brady worked on the ordinance to get it in line with the state of Delaware.
Is that all, Chief?
Yes,
Thank you. And your recommendation is for this?
I'm in favor of it. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go now to, if we could, then to go to Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady, you have your mic off right now.
It should be back on, Mr. Mayor.
There it
It's
is.
good to
Thank you,
see-
sir. You're our attorney for our police department, and I'd like to have a little explanation from you, if you could, please.
Certainly. As the mayor and the honorable town manager so stated, the state changed it a couple years ago, and our officers continued to use the town ordinance. The judge was changing it to the state or the state code, and we were losing the revenue. So what this does is allow the town to get the revenue for the violation of the town ordinance plus the surcharges. We match the language exactly, so the people that are convicted of this can benefit by the law change last year that will allow it to be expunged automatically when they get their fingerprints done at SBI in Dover or in Georgetown. So I think this is a good move for the town. And I ask the chief and I think the town manager support this ordinance. I asked, send a copy to Mr. Townsend, or tried to, but I think he'll find it's in conformity with the rest of the town ordinances.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Is that all?
That's all. Thank
Thank
you.
you. I want to make a comment first, and I'll notice Mr. Bauer. This, of course, is not a point of money in any way, shape, or form, except that for the fact that, you know, if we were charging people in a criminal, they would go to the state courts, and therefore the fines would go to the state. So our idea was that we would not charge them and let them have a record, a negative spot on their permanent file, permanent transcript. So we make it a civil offense rather than a criminal offense. And because we understand people do foolish things in their life, and don't want it to follow through their life if they change. Commissioner Bauer,
Yeah, I just want a motion so we can discuss this and vote on it. So motion to approve this?
very good. So moved then, Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Second,
Who had the second on it?
Dave.
Mr.
David.
Jazinski?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So moved and second. Is there any further discussion on the item, Mr. Persinger?
Yeah, I have no problem with the ordinance. I would just like to suggest a somewhat structural change. Where in, this is in section 85-1315A, where you've deleted part of subsection 5. But I think you're leaving in those subparagraphs A through D. And the way I'm reading this, at least, it would leave those subparagraphs as part of number 4. And I don't think it belongs there. I don't think they really are subparagraphs of number 4. So I would suggest that you relabel A through D as 5 through 8. And then the last 2 lines of the existing language should be labeled as paragraph 9 or subparagraph 9. I think the ordinance works better that way. And because I think those things are separable and really equivalent in terms of the way that the other paragraphs are numbered. So that's my suggestion in terms of adopting this.
Mr. Brady, did you have any comment on that? You wrote the ordinance.
I tried to follow the existing section and save those paragraphs, those subsections, because I thought they were necessary, and left them under 4 because I felt that they could work there. But I respect the comment of the commissioner.
Commissioner Persinger, do you feel it's necessary to change after Mr.?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works better. I'm not trying to eliminate anything. I think this really accomplishes what Mr. Brady was trying to do. And I just think it improves the ordinance just a bit.
Did you want to make a friendly amendment to the motion then?
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we relabel subparagraphs A through D as 5 through 8 and label the last 2 lines, at least the last 2 lines on my, when I look it up on Eco 360, label those as paragraph 9.
Will the maker of the motion accept that?
Yes, I accept that.
And the second, do you accept it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a properly motioned and second amended item. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Persinger.
Well, I would just like to get rid of the puzzled look on our town council's, or on our town solicitor's face before we move forward.
I'm not so much puzzled as I'm just trying to catch up a little bit. I don't think I've got an opinion on this. If Mr. Brady is fine with it or accepts the changes as not dramatically undercutting the intent here, then that's more than good enough for me.
Mr. Brady, do you have any problem with the suggested changes?
I have no problem with the suggested changes by the commissioner.
And as far as you're concerned, it will not change the intent and the language of the bill?
No, the language for what we move it to chapter 80 doesn't change. And what remains in chapter 85 will still be able, that the court will be able to act appropriately, and the police department will be able to issue a summons appropriately for the criminal charges that remain under section 85 involving alcohol.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other comments from the commissioners discussion? Mr. Persinger?
I just want to be clear in the last 2 lines of the current ordinance or the current code, the phrase "or 5" would still get deleted, just as was suggested here. And I don't know if that's going to be entirely clear in the way I have suggested modifying this, but I just want to make that point so we don't lose it, because that is an important deletion.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from any other commissioners? Anybody else have any other comments? Ms. Sanders, do you have that all right? Are you okay with what has been, you were able to write it up properly?
I have, yes.
Thank you very much. I'll call the vote on this item then if there's no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any against, say nay. Any abstentions, say so. Hearing none, unanimous, Ms. Sander. Item number 3, discuss and possible vote to approve the use of LESO funds to purchase bowler wrap for the Dewey Beach Police Department. And I'm going to first go to give a background on this to Mr. Zolper and then to Chief Sam Mackert. Mr. Zolper and then Sam Mackert, then we'll go for a motion and then discussion. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the bowler wrap, I was able to observe it during one of Chief Mackert's demonstrations that he had with the company. Continue with Captain Warren's review of the police department. I think this is moving in the right direction. We're actually doing compliance without paying the way this device works. And in today's world, the way things are currently going, I think it shows that the town of Dewey Beach, Chief Mackert and his police department are trying to be very progressive to move away from paying compliance. And this does move in that direction. Even if we never use it, it shows that the department is moving in that direction. Instead of going to your pepper spray or your ASP or your taser, you could go to this and there'd be very little possible little injury done with compliance once this thing is deployed. And with that, sir, I will turn it over to the chief.
Chief Mackert.
Thank you, Mr. Zolper. We had retired Captain Warren in for use of force training with the department. And at the conclusion of that, I had seen some information about the bowler wrap and invited the company to come down and do a demonstration. They sent an instructor down from, he's a retired SWAT officer from Wilmington, North Carolina, give us a presentation on the device. Again, as Mr. Zolper said, everything we carry on our belts, the pepper spray, the ASP, which is an expandable steel baton, the taser, that all causes pain for the suspect to comply. This particular device does not cause any pain. Lieutenant Hawker was the first test subject, and then I went second. There's no pain for this device. Where I originally had seen it, when we deal with a person in mental crisis, normally we're called by a family member for assistance. The last thing they want to see is their loved one, us have to deploy a taser and them go down in pain and hurting. This would give us another tool at our disposal to use. Like the rest of the devices we carry, we've always had, there's always a case where something's failed or it's not worked as it should, be it the person on alcohol, their mental capacity. It's just one more tool that we have at our disposal where we can remain 10 to 20 foot away from the person and reduce injury to the officer to take a person into custody without harm to them or the police officer.
That all, Chief?
That's all I have right now, yes.
Thank you. Do I hear Commissioner Bauer?
Yeah, I'd like the motion to approve this.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Bauer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Stevens. Is there any discussion on the matter, Commissioner Persinger, and then Commissioner Jazinski?
Yeah, I think we need to hear from the town manager what the total cost of this would be and how many of these devices we're talking about purchasing. I respectfully disagree with a couple of points that the chief made, and that is that this is a totally pain-free device. I think the point to make here is that this is going to be used in the summertime. And from what I've read, the primary target for this device is generally going to be the lower legs, might be the lower arms, all of which is going to be exposed skin. There are barbs on the end of the Kevlar wires that shoot out from this device, and it has to anchor into something. if you're fully clothed, it can certainly anchor into your clothing. If that's bare skin, it's going to anchor into your skin if you get wrapped up. So I think that needs to be, I think the point needs to be made. There's not a lot of evidence about the effectiveness of this device. There was a big pilot project that the LAPD has undertaken, and I think during maybe the first 3 to 6 months of that pilot, it was used only 9 times. And only one of those 9 times did it fully wrap up the individual. Now, I think they've judged it successful because the other, several of the other times that it was used, they didn't have to use any other form of force to apprehend a suspect. So they see that bowler wrap as something of a deterrent. But I guess from my perspective, I won't vote against this. I mean, I'd like the police department to have another non-lethal tool, but I would prefer that they do it on some sort of a pilot project, pilot basis rather than equipping all of the officers, make it available for on-duty officers to stop by, pick up that equipment, and then to assess the effectiveness of it rather than purchasing, a device for each of the on-duty officers. I think you also need a policy for when and how to use this. There are only certain circumstances under which it should be used or can be used effectively. I also think you need to think about, because there is a high probability, I believe, during the summertime, that this could a barb could get embedded in skin. You need a policy for what to do about that. Does that require EMT, a call to the EMT? Is it appropriate for a police officer to remove that barb from a patient's skin before it's transported? This is all something that can be handled in policy, but I think there needs to be some thought given to developing that policy and then assessing the effectiveness of this. Again, I won't vote against it, no matter how the other commissioners believe we should go in terms of how many devices should be purchased. I think it's worth going to as a pilot project. I don't support it as a full-scale purchase at this point, but if the other commissioners believe that's the way we should go, I would be willing to support that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Persinger. Mr. Jazinski?
Could Commissioner Persinger's questions get answered? I mean, starting with especially, there's no dollar figure associated with this. So that's number one. And then the concerns he had about policy and Bloody, I'd like to hear the answers to those before I ask my questions.
I will ask the chief and or Mr. Zolper to answer those questions, if you would, please.
When Bowler Wrap was there doing a demonstration to the police department, that's one thing I inquired about, is what are other agencies using for policies. They sent me several police agencies' policy on the deployment of the Bowler Wrap. So I have them to review, and I was going to also, at our next training class, go over with Dr. Warren and John Brady and Bill Zolper. Once I select the policy that I think is best for the department, and have them either concur or make appropriate changes.
So you would have no problem if there was a contingency in this vote that you have a specific policy and also address the problem of possible breakage of the skin?
No, I mean, right now, when we deploy a taser, the person gets darts put into them. They're put into them before the electric charge comes. There's probes that go into a person. We normally remove them, but if the person does request medical attention, that's a priority. We afford everybody in our custody medical attention, but we remove them. That's one of the things I asked about, if somebody was in a pair of bathing trunks or, didn't have any, that much clothing on. And what happens is there's so much cord that goes around them. A lot of times those hooks get hooked into the cord itself, but there is a potential that it could go into their skin. They're very tiny, but if they wanted, EMS to respond and remove them, sure, we would call them.
Mr. Jazinski, does that answer your questions or Mr. Persinger's questions through you?
Well, yeah, I still don't know how much this is going to cost, including training. I mean, how much money is it?
Mr. Zoper, you had your hand up, sir?
No, I was going to say, the chief, correct me, it's approximately $12,000 for 10 of those. That includes the training of the trainer. It includes the equipment that would go on the belt. Chief, if that's not correct, please correct me.
No, you're correct. And it also includes, I believe he said they will train at least 2 to 3 members of the department as instructors so that they can train the rest of our agency.
Okay.
We'll have them in-house. That's included in the price along with the training cartridges. They provide them for free. That's one thing that Taser doesn't. You have to pay for your training cartridges. Bowler Wrap covers the cost of your training cartridges.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Jazinski,
So I only had one question then, in addition to what Gary had asked, which was, Chief Mackert, if you think about like the last year or two, how many encounters were there among your kind of full-time staff where this potentially could have been a tool that could have been used to provide less escalation in the encounter?
I would say at least 10 to 15 times.
Oh, that's good. That's more than I would have thought. Okay. Yeah.
At least, yes.
Okay.
is that all, Mr. Jazinski, from you?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stevens, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I had 2 quick questions, both kind of very similar to David. What is the cost? I understand it's $12,000 for 10 of the BOLA devices. What is it per cartridge? Assuming that if you're doing, I assume that you're not wrapping this thing. So what is the per cartridge cost?
Bill, do you have that on the sheet? I don't have the sheet in front of me.
But when we discussed this after the training, it was $30 to $40 for every new car.
That's what I recall, but I didn't want to say that for a fact, but I thought it was somewhere around $30 to $40.
So now
Mr. Stevens, anything else?
Yeah, I just had one question. I think very similar to David Jazinski's question is, from an escalation perspective, historically, over the last, you can use your own time frame, 3 years, how many times have we used the taser in town? And
It's deployed quite a bit in the summertime.
right. Okay.
Quite a bit. One of the things that I did see, and Ashley's got the full presentation from Bowler Wrap, but verbal commands is your lowest use of force in the force continuum where you escalate up to your firearm. The above voice is the Bowler Wrap. And I don't know what to say to Commissioner Persinger. I didn't have a pair of shorts on. I had my uniform pants on when it was deployed on me, but I didn't feel anything other than I couldn't move my legs because the thing wrapped around. What happens is when the thing's propelled out, it leaves the device. It's not attached to the device anymore. It comes out, and then it just spins around your legs or your upper torso, wherever the officer's aiming. I didn't feel anything. Sure, if that barb got me, I'm sure I probably would have felt something, but I felt no pain at all when it wrapped me up.
Thank you, Chief. And if there's no other discussion, I'd like to make a comment that I think that it really is a less violent way to restrain an individual that the police department deems needs to be restrained. There are problems with all the different restraint methods, but I think it's a less violent way, less harm to the individual, possible less harm to the individual by using the Bowler Wrap. I see there probably are some problems in crowded areas, just like there are with the taser, and certainly like there are with firearms. So I'm pretty much in favor of this. But is there any further discussion from the commissioners? Hearing none, I'll call.
Gary.
I'm sorry, Mr. Persinger.
Yeah, I just want to say to the chief and to town manager as well that, all the training that you talked about, the de-escalation training, that's great stuff. It's exactly the kind of thing I think that the public will view as a very beneficial step. And I'm not against this as a tool. I'm just concerned about the effectiveness of it. And as I said, the LAPD deployed it 9 times. Only one of those times did it fully wrap up the suspect. You know, most people are not going to be standing around with their arms to their side and their legs together. So they're easily wrapped up. And so there is the potential for it not, not working. It does apparently use some sort of a charge so that there's a loud bang, if you will, associated with it. So, there's an effect there in terms of the suspect. So, again, I'm not convinced that we should be doing this full scale. I'd like to see a pilot with a few of these, but it's not a lot of money. If the rest of the commissioners want to go full scale, I'm willing to support that as well.
I'm going to go.
One other
Yes,
thing.
sir, Mr. President. Go ahead.
I appreciate it, Chief. It sounds like you have been looking at policies that other jurisdictions have been using. I think that's a good thing. And you seem to be on track with considering some of the medical aspects that could possibly be associated with it. So that's good as well. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Zolper, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I just think that with the way things are going in law enforcement right now, even if this is never deployed, but we end up in court about a use of force, we can show that at least the town and the police department has tried less than lethal ways to apprehend an individual. So I think $12,000 to $13,000 sounds like a lot coming out of the LISO fund, but when you look at what's happening to towns and cities across the country with the current lawsuits, I think this is very little to spend to try to bring a product to our folks that even if they use it once a year, it's going to be worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zolper. I appreciate hearing no more discussion. I'll call the question on the item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against say nay. I'm sorry. The question
Well,
was,
there's no specifics. There are no specifics to the motion. We never made a motion that included any specifics. So I don't know what we're approving.
well, they did make a motion to accept the expenditure of funds from the LESO program.
Unlimited, 100. I mean,
No, they
No,
asked a
he
question
said
of how much it was.
For 10,
it should be
12.
part of the. It should be part of the motion. Is all I'm saying.
okay. Who made the original motion? Mr.
I
Bauer,
did.
would you remake the motion, please?
Yes, I'd like to approve this request for up to 15,000 and use LESO funds for it.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second that.
Mr. Persinger, second. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any against, say nay. Any abstention? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4. Discuss the operation of low-speed vehicles within the town of Dewey Beach. I'm going to initially call on the town manager for this item because the letter was originally sent to he and all of us, but through the town manager, and he had the discussion with the owner. The owner is online and will be able to answer any question. I tell you, let's do this first, if you don't mind, Mr. Soper. Let's go to the owner so he can make his statement first. Mr. DeBeck?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Is it DeBeck?
Yes, sir.
Go right ahead and.
And I'm right here with my partner, Peter Cooker, as well.
Are you guys?
Okay. How are you all gentlemen today? Thank you very much for coming. If you would give us your speech on this, if you would, your spiel, your proposal, and then we'll have further discussion after that.
Yep. So we started our startup company here at the University of Delaware last fall. We attempted to start it at Dewey Beach last summer. There were some legal problems that we ran into just trying to get it started and off the ground. But basically what we do, it's called Dewey Rides LLC, and we're a micro transport solution to basically people's needs in micro transport areas. We use fully electric, lifted, street legal 6-seater LSVs that play music, and our whole thing is offering safe, reliable, and efficient fun transportation for people in the summertime, while also innovating technology and finding a way to create better solutions.
And what is your proposal for the town?
We need the ordinance to allow LSVs to be able to operate on a dual highway to be passed in order for us to completely offer our full service. We have a deal with the Hyatt Hotel in Dewey Beach. I also sent in a letter of recommendation from them last year. And so our whole thing is we have a deal with them where we keep our vehicles there. And basically, we can't get onto Route 1 or any other parts of Dewey without getting on the dual highway and operating. Our vehicles go up to 27 miles an hour. I know that there's a law being passed, or at least in proposal, to lower the speed limits down to 25 on the dual highway, which is something that I think could be very correspondent to kind of what we're trying to do. And basically, if we could get the ordinance passed before the summertime starts, we'd be able to continue our service and grow our business down at Dewey Beach.
And to explain your service just a little bit further, what would your actual service be? If I wanted to use your service, how would that happen, and what would you do for me as a passenger?
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is let the customers choose what time they'd want to be picked up, dropped off. What we'd really like to do is book groups and parties. So let's say there's 4 to 5 people that are going to be going out for the remainder of the night. Let's say 8 p.m. to 1 in the morning when the bar is closed. We would give them the option to completely rent our service for the night, and basically we'd operate off of gratuity only, just tips. So we'd be able to offer our service to people that reserve us and request a ride, but we'd also be able to, if people were interested, wanted to flag us down, find a way to contact us, we'd have a website and a phone line as well. That would make us very easily accessible.
And if I were a potential patron, I would call the phone number and say, what, I want to go from building X to building Y, or the hotel to the end of town, or whatever. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I think what we'll do here now, since are you finished, Mr. Dubeck, with your presentation?
Yes, I am. And I just want to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Right, that's what I want to do. I'm going to suggest that we have, and Mr. Stevens, I'll get right with you. I'm going to suggest that we have the commissioners ask questions, and then you guys, the owners, go offline and listen offline while we discuss, and Mr. Zolper will discuss also. And then we'll take a vote. We'll discuss it, I'm sorry. And so want to go ahead, the commissioners, if this is not a discuss and vote item, it was not put on that way. So commissioners, do you have any questions of the gentleman here, the owners? Mr. Stevens, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was curious, and it's real quick. I think of low-speed vehicles, I think of golf carts. So the question I have for you is, how many passengers on carts, and if you were to operate out of Hyatt, how many carts are going to be there? And the third is, have you gone into any other towns like Rehoboth, for example, and approached them with this concept?
I have not gone to the town of Rehoboth. I did talk briefly with the people of town of Bethany Beach. Was an area I thought would be very, very good for this to work. But basically, they are golf carts. They're lifted golf carts, but they are LSVs. So they have seat belts, turn signals, windshield wipers, everything that a car would need to legally drive on the road. And we would have 2 of them at the Hyatt.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I believe Mr. Bauer and Mr. Persinger had their hand up. Mr. Bauer, your mic's off.
Sorry about that. Real quick question. How many seats are in the vehicle?
There's 6, including the driver, so room for 5 passengers.
And I'm thinking of, like, I go to Delray Beach down in Florida, the same type of vehicle that I'm assuming, I mean, technically it's a golf cart, but it's extended, so it's not, I think it's, that's widely accepted in other towns. So I'd like to see us try it personally.
Is that all, Mr. Bauer?
That's it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Persinger.
So just to be clear, the only way you would raise revenue as a company would be through gratuities?
No, so all of our revenue in which is what we currently do is through mobile advertising. So our vehicles are head turners, you know, they play music, people are having a great time on it. People really turn and look when they see our vehicles coming by. So we think that, well, we've already proven in our current demographic that we can be a leading innovator in advertising solutions for not only local businesses, but also corporate sponsors as well. We've been talking with some of the alcohol distributors in Delaware, NKS, standard distributors, and being able to leverage a way that we can sign contracts for these alcohol companies. And I've also talked to Mr. Alex Pyers, owner of Highway 1, being able to, you know, do promotional stuff with his restaurants, liquor stores, and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the gentleman? I have one. It's just, in general, I'll get right after this, Mr. Townsend, I'll come to you. Where are you located now with your business, and who do you serve, and you know, give us the background there, if you would.
Yeah, so we did 2 semesters at the University of Delaware in Newark. I'd say that we did anywhere from between 14 to 1,600 rides. I'd say that 95% of our demographic, our target customers, are college girls getting home safely from the bars, getting home safely from parties. And that's really, you know, what we've emphasized with not only the town of Newark, but also with the University of Delaware Police and the Newark Police is, you know, we really just want to create a service that people are going to feel safe. With other third-party transportation services like Uber, Lyft, you know, there isn't really rickshaw up here, so we kind of don't have the same type of competition that we would down there. But just what we've been able to do alone, and, you know, with our data and with what we've been able to measure through our metrics, is that, you know, our electric vehicles seating only 5 people are servicing up to 500% more than the university buses are. So I think that what we were able to do was provide a really innovative solution that, you know, at first was people were very hesitant to accept from, you know, a safety perspective. But once we got on the road, people kind of understood that really are a solution, you know, to a problem that people are seeing every day. And we just thought that we could be, you know, the leaders in what we're trying to do, and essentially the first people to do it.
So you are on the university, not in Newark, or you're also in Newark, or where?
Just University of Delaware campus within the city of Newark limits. It's about a 3.25 mile radius in what we service.
So just in the campus radius?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. And you're still doing that? I mean, you're doing that now?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the gentleman? What I'm proposing, if you all don't, I'm sorry, Mr. Townsend, you're right. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Dubek, I'm interested in your licensure requirements. What licensure requirements you think apply to your use? And I did hear you say that you would allow people to flag you down. That would be part of your business model, to be flagged down and pick up riders or patrons and take them from point A to point B. Is that what you're doing now? And are you required to be licensed as a public carrier to do that?
We, after speaking with the Office of Public Carrier, we found out that because our service is full gratuity, we aren't charging, that we actually would not fall under being a public carrier. We don't, like, if somebody flags us down, we're not going to stop and pull over on the side of the road. What we'll simply do is just say, hey, follow us on Instagram, text our cell phone number, and then we'll be able to give you more information regarding our service.
Okay. So
Anything else? Go ahead, sir.
you're also not required to be licensed as, and I forget the terminology, but it's like an app-based service.
I believe it's a transportation network company.
So are you required to carry that license or not? You're
No.
exempt from that as well.
We're separate, a separate service.
Very good. Those are my questions.
Mr. Zolper, you had a question?
I don't have a question, sir, but I do have some background when you're ready for that.
Okay, thank you. I guess what I'm going to suggest, if the commissioners don't mind, that, once they've now given their statement, this is a discuss only item. So if we could have the owners go offline and listen to us in the standby with Ms. Sander, and then while we discuss, if we have any further questions that we want answered, we could call you back up. Is that all right with the commissioners? All right, thank you. Let's do that. Ms. Sanders, if you take them offline temporarily and then hold them in the waiting room. All right, thank you. Commissioners, Mr. Zolper, you wanted to make a statement now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. After discussing with you, Mr. Townsend, I did the background work on this and contacted the Office of Public Carrier, spoke with Raymond Banks, who's in charge of that. And something like you heard, there are two different types of carriers. There's the private free, not for any funding, no money, just for tips and gratuities. And then there's the public carrier use, which is what Mr. Townsend was referring to. So I asked Mr. Banks to double check on them getting tips, how that would work. He ran it by Stacy Stewart of the AG's office, and they came back, as long as they were providing tips, they were not considered a public carrier. They're considered a private carrier. I also spoke with the city of Newark, where they currently operate. I spoke with Terry Clinton up there. She's our communications director, but she was the one that had the most contact with this company. She said the mayor thought it was such a good idea that the mayor actually did not like a promotion, but spoke very favorable of this. I also spoke with the University of Delaware Chief of Police, Pat Ogden. He said officially they do not operate on the campus. They operate off the campus, but he has had no problems with them. The city of Newark said they had no problems with him. But I do have my own opinion about this. I think when you do let these folks in, what's to keep multiple other carts from coming in? And I think this Route 1 out here is different than a lot of other roads across the state with the amount of traffic to come through it. And I think it would be good before we vote on this, sir, to have the chief make his comments.
Chief, did you want to make comments, Chief?
I thought about this. I would like to learn more from these two gentlemen. He made quite a bit about the music. Are they going to pull off to the side of the road and wait for somebody to come get in their cart at bar closing time with the music up loud? Somebody sitting there in front of somebody's house with a window open. I've got rickshaws. I've got the establishments emptying out. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the sidewalks, we all know, get over capacity and filter out to the shoulder. You've got people up and down the highway. It is Route 1 through there. I've got some safety concerns. I think it's good. I like that, the city of Newark hasn't had any problems, nor has the University of Delaware. I think that's a good sign for us. But one thing I do have a question is, DelDOT's requiring, I believe, for the city to pass an ordinance. Once you open Pandora's box and you've passed this ordinance, then what do we have following these two gentlemen? That would be my concern. We're already, our infrastructure, where there's sidewalks and shoulders, like I said, with the bicycles, the rickshaws, the cars. I'm just worried about safety. I've been out there when we've had bad accidents and fatals. I've seen it. And that's my only concern. Not that these two individuals would be an issue. I thought he said he was only going to operate two carts, or he was going to put two carts down there, which is not the problem. My problem is they're requiring an ordinance. And then once that ordinance is passed, then who comes following them and how many come following them? That would be my concern. I think they're operating a good company. I think they've been vetted. I have no problem with that. But once that ordinance is passed, and like Commissioner Bauer said, it's popular, in your beach communities down south. I'd have no problem for like a trial if we could do that. But once that ordinance is passed, then what do we have coming? That's my concern that I wanted to share with you.
And I'm going to now make my point and then ask the rest of you again if you have anything else to say. I have a problem. They said they were authorized and are run on the campus of the university. The university, if I understand it from our town manager and our chief, said, no, they do not. You know, and they said they were not in Newark, they were on the university. And the university says they're not operating on the university. So I have a problem with that. I also have a problem with I like the idea. I have a problem with more than one company operating in our town during the summer with the amount of traffic on the highway. Remember, this company, low speed vehicles are on the highway itself, not on the shoulder like the rickshaw type vehicles are. They are low speed vehicles that would be licensed to be on the highway. So that's my problem. Mr. Stevens and then Mr. Persinger.
Yeah, I like Paul, I was recently in Delray Beach, Florida. They're all over the place. They're a great way to get around in a really drawn out town, right? So you got several miles covered, you want to cover pretty quickly. I like the concept a lot. It would replace, really, in my mind, it replaces the rickshaws because no one's Ubering from one end of town to the other. What my concern would be once we pass the ordinance, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, but this would open up for any resident to have a golf cart and to be able to use it around town.
That's correct as far as I see.
So that creates a whole new issue in regards to parking and to traffic area and people using it to go get carry out. So that's the only comment I have to make.
Thank you. Mr. Persinger and then Mr. Bauer.
Yeah, the problem for me with this is that this company is proposing to provide in Dewey Beach many of the same services that a public carrier or a transportation network company provide, without any of the regulation that those two types of companies are subject to. One of the requirements as a public carrier, in order to be authorized to operate by the state, is that you have sufficient financial ability to compensate members of the public for injuries to person or property which they may sustain from acts or failures to act as a public carrier. We have no assurance of any kind in terms of the amount of liability coverage that they have, whether it's sufficient. In some cases, the state requires that someone who wants to become a public carrier post a bond to make sure that they have this area covered. For a transportation network company, there are requirements for liability insurance, requirements for the drivers, their checks of their driving records. And I'm not, trying to cast any aspersions on the two individuals that are operating this company. They may be doing just fine and certainly would meet all those requirements, but there's no one providing that kind of insurance. The state's not doing it, and the town isn't set up to do that. We're talking about vehicles that are going to mix with trucks and big SUVs. And these are vehicles that provide substantially less physical protection around the occupants than you would get with a normal automobile or SUV, that kind of vehicle. So I would have a problem passing an ordinance to allow this sort of thing to happen. And I think Commissioner Stevens makes a good point that this would open up the opportunity for anyone to have that kind of vehicle running up and down Route 1. So for me, this would be a difficult thing to support.
Thank you, Mr. Persinger. Mr. Bauer?
Yeah, as I'm thinking about this, I mean, we obviously can control how many people have it, like we do with the concession contract on the beach, correct? Like Lynham has the contract, they're the only ones allowed to do it. So obviously we have the capability to limit how many and what type in the terms of it. So like, for example, we could do a 1-year trial with this company, and then, sometime next, February, March, put a bid out and let's see if there's other companies that are interested, and we're going to, award it to one vendor or two vendors or whatever we're going to do. But I think it just takes a little bit of work on our end to define, all right, part of this, if we're going to award a contract, you need to, like, what's Lynham's insurance coverage that he had to supply to us, right? I'm sure we had to ask him for something. Fred,
We
do you
did.
know offhand?
Yeah, we have it.
There is.
Yeah, so so we could define these areas. I mean, they're not, they're gray now because we don't have this type of service, but I think it's pretty easy to come up with an award to one company or two companies or however, whatever we decide. So that's just my 2 cents on it, and put a contract length to it. Make it a year, 2 years, whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Mr. Townsend, I want to ask you a question, then I want to ask Mr. Jasinski, because he's the only one I haven't gotten an opinion from so far, including myself. Mr. Townsend, what's your thought about what Mr. Bauer just said about a limited ability, or the ability to limit the number of companies that would have, if we pass this resolution, would it or would it not open it up to everybody?
Well, we don't have an ordinance in front of us.
No, that's right.
At this point, but what I'm envisioning is a couple of things. One is that the ordinance would authorize the use of these vehicles on the road. It wouldn't restrict the use of those vehicles to people who are in this particular line of business.
And
now,
could we or could we not make that restriction?
Well, I appreciate the remarks of Mr. Bauer, but I don't think that the ordinance that we have in place that allows us to retain a particular contractor to do beach concessions is a comparable situation. And it would be problematic too. I think for one thing, if we were actually retaining a service such as this to serve our citizens, then I think we'd be much closer to the line of fire in terms of liability if we were giving authorization to one company to do this kind of work. I don't think they envision themselves being a contract carrier for the town of Dewey Beach. I think they envision themselves as being a private entity, not an entity that signs an agreement with Dewey Beach. So I'm not certain that we have what we would need in place to limit the number of providers of these low-speed vehicle transportation services.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Mr. Jasinski, did you have any comment at all?
Well, I had a question. The aspect of allowing low-speed vehicles on Route 1, Mr. Townsend, is that a request that can be done administratively, or does it require a vote of the commissioners?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? My voice was breaking up here.
The change to allow low-speed vehicles on Route 1, that in order to allow the type of vehicle they want to operate, is that change require a vote of the commissioners, or is that an administrative request that can be made by the town manager? And the question is to Mr. Townsend.
Yeah, so it's more than even a requirement that we have a vote from the commissioners, but in fact, the commissioners must enact an ordinance. I believe that's what the state law provides with respect to these vehicles, that they must enact an ordinance.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Mayor, you asked me for my opinion. Kind of going into this, I think it's an innovative idea, and I'm very excited about it. However, the police chief has some very valid concerns about the proliferation, the music aspect of it, which is obviously designed to attract attention and get people to use the service, as well as proliferation among multiple vendors. And then we thought maybe we'd restrict it to one vendor. And Mr. Townsend brought up that if we do that, that puts the liability bullseye on us, So I want to be supportive of these guys and their concept, but right now I'm struggling with a way to do that and satisfy the legitimate safety and whatnot concerns that the police chief has, as well as the liability concerns that our town solicitor raised.
Thank you, Mr. Jasinski. Well, I'm going to sum up a little bit. I don't see the support. This is a discuss item only. And the reason was because I wanted to see if there was support for this or not. And then we could take it further as discussed and vote for the next session, the next meeting. But I don't see the support amongst the majority of the commissioners to change it. I see the support for the company. I do not see the support to change the regulation or or to have an ordinance to change, allow low-speed vehicles in our town on the highway. And that's what's required by the state if the state was going to change it. So, and unless there's further discussion, I would ask that the town manager contact the two gentlemen and tell them that at this time, there's not enough support for changing the regulation for low-speed vehicles being allowed on the highway. Okay, Mr. Zolper?
Yes, sir.
All right, so if you will contact them, and actually, I think they're in that waiting room. I think that can you contact them in that waiting room, Ashley?
I can send them a message. There's no guarantee that they will see it, but I can send a message.
Will you send a text message? Is that what you do?
It's just a message through the computer. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so well, you're talking to a dinosaur here.
Mm.
So anyway, if you would do that and have them contact the town manager, or the town manager contact them and tell them that there's just not the support at this time for changing the regulation about the highway. All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item then. Discuss and possibly vote to approve an ordinance to amend chapter 65 beaches of the municipal code of the town of Dewey Beach, Delaware, to add a section regarding beach and baywalk rules on Van Dyke Avenue Bayside. I would remind everybody that this is not a discussion of what we approved last month, because everything has been approved. It is now asking you to approve to put it in written form in our code. So we've already approved last month the regulations. And Mr. Persinger, since this was sort of your bailiwick, you put it together, you spent all the time and effort on it. Did you want to start off the discussion?
Sure. Well, as the mayor said, this is basically just a codification of what we approved. I believe it was at the April 9 meeting. So in doing that and making these kinds of changes, however, it does affect some other sections of the code. So if we are to approve this set of rules today for the Bayside Beach and the Baywalk and the gazebo, then we have to make a few minor changes in other sections of the code. And I think the easiest way to do that, and you have a draft of that, what I will call a cleanup amendment, is to designate some of the existing sections of the code as applying just to the Oceanside Beach. We have, in many respects, in this new section that we're going to add to the code for the Bayside Beach, kind of a mirror image of what we already have in place on the Ocean Beach. But there are a few differences, and so there is some necessary cleanup. I would defer to the town solicitor, or actually ask the town solicitor what the process should be. I believe that we could adopt the codification of the Bayside rules today, and then perhaps we would have to come back at the next meeting to adopt the cleanup for the Oceanside rules. Is that a fair statement of the process that we should follow?
Mr. Townsend?
I think that would be a fair statement of the process. Is the cleanup instrument that was on the website, is that noticed for possible action today? No?
No.
I don't believe it is, no.
Okay, right. Okay, so yes, then that's the only way we can proceed.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Persinger, did you want to discuss the ordinance first?
I don't really have anything really to discuss here.
And did you want to make the
codification? Let me just say, the only other thing that we did have to add to this is at the end, section 65-32 civil offenses. Offenses on the Oceanside rules are considered a civil offense. And so, in a parallel way, any offense of these rules would also be a civil offense. And so that's the only thing that we really added here. And hopefully that's without objection. And if it is, then I'm certainly happy to offer a motion that we approve this draft ordinance that would amend chapter 65 Beaches of the Municipal Code of the Town of Dewey Beach, Delaware, to add a new Article 3 thereto regarding beach and baywalk rules on Van Dyke Avenue, Bayside.
I'll
All right,
second that.
there. Mr. Bauer, you second that?
Yes.
All right, and we'll open it up for discussion, and we'll let the maker of the motion and the second discuss first if they care to, and then move on to other people. Mr. Persinger, do you have anything?
I have nothing to add, no.
Mr. Bauer, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Does anybody else have anything to add? Hearing not, then I'll call the question then. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against, say nay. Any abstentions? Ashley, it's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 6, discuss and possibly vote to approve hiring consulting company to assist with wireless facilities 5G pole placement and related items. I'm going to ask first for Mr. Zoper. We asked for his recommendation, and we asked for the recommendation of Town Hall. Therefore, Mr. Zoper and Mr. Dede and the building official were all involved in. So, Mr. Zoper, if you'll give your statement, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. After reviewing the 4 different proposals, there was one that stood out that was in quite a distance from Delaware. So considering travel and some other items, we ruled that one out. The other 3 we looked at were comparably the same, with what one standing out, and that was JMT. And the reason I say that is that they are very familiar with Dewey Beach. They're located here in Delaware, and comparably, they are offering the same services as the other 2 companies that we looked at, CTC and Vicom. So taking out the conflict of interest piece, when I ranked those, that's why I ranked JMT number 1. And again, it was based on their services, how familiar they are with Delaware and what we've been dealing with here in Dewey Beach, and with the cost of those services being comparable to the other 2 proposals. There's nothing wrong with the other 2 proposals. I looked at both of them. The one from Vicom over in Avalon, New Jersey. They also have 2 or 3 other jurisdictions there on the coast in Jersey, and they are an LLC here in Delaware. And with CTC, they've done work over in Montgomery County and done a good job. They've done some work in some other areas around the country, and they could also start work within 2 weeks after we decide that we were going to, whoever we choose, if we pick them. But again, when I got back to just looking at who's familiar with Dewey Beach, who's from the area, who gives us what we're looking at for cost and service, that's why I ranked JMT number 1, sir. And myself, Mr. Dedes, and the building inspector.
Any other comments, Mr. Zoper?
None at this time, sir.
Well, I'm going to open it up for general comment, and then we'll go to a motion. I'd like to get the sense of everybody with the general comments. And Mr. Jasinski.
So I get how these 3 companies are kind of closely ranked, and I get JMT's kind of already knowledge of Dewey Beach and knowing the players in Del Dot. But from my perspective, that cuts both ways. And I think this is probably the issue that's had kind of the loudest public opinion in many, many years in terms of people being upset about things. And I just think it's very hard for a company like JMT to be able to go back and take a look at what's already been improved that they were involved in with a critical eye, because they were involved in it. Even if they have separation of duties, it's still the same. It's still the same company. And there's also the complication that they've got other business with Del Dot going on, which Del Dot's the one who's going to give them more business, not Dewey Beach. So from my perspective, I'd like to see us do one of the other companies that, even though they don't necessarily know Del Dot and Dewey Beach as well, they have the skills to do it. CTC, I was very impressed with when they were on the phone. That's the one that kind of stuck in my head when we kind of did those web interviews. But that's kind of my thought. I think the conflict of interest thing is a big issue to address the public's concern about what's already been approved.
At this time, I welcome Mr. Dedes online. We have two Mr. Dedes. Myself is listed as Mr. Dedes, and the white-haired gentleman is the real Mr. Dedes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Dedes, would you like to make a comment?
I would, and I understand Mr. Jasinski's issue, because that was an issue that we all kind of shared. We did discuss the matter with JMT, and of course, they've got a separate division that deals with the potential conflict. They have nothing to do with the possible consideration that we bring them in. What they're saying is that division that, for example, that deals with DelDOT would have no interaction with the town of Dewey Beach. They purposely represent only the contractor, the contractee, which would be us. So consequently, when we talked about DelDOT, their position was that DelDOT gave them a specification as far as what they should represent, as far as consideration for 5G. That's as far as they went. Did they approve them going into our what we consider our right of way? No, they had nothing to do with that. So they also understand that the perception of conflict of interest is there. And when I talked to Mr. Masadi, who is my contact person with them, they felt that they understood it well, and they could actually understand why the town might want to consider somebody else. But our recommendation was initially based because they know the state of Delaware, they know the 5G issues that we're dealing with, and they've been very helpful as far as considerations and consultations that I personally have had with them. However, I can understand the perception, and we looked at the other three contract companies that came in that gave a bid on. We ruled out the company from Florida, as Mr. Zolper said, and these other companies are good. VCOM is good, as well as the CMT. But what I would consider is that I would still go by JMT as the first company to recommend. They also were the most cost-effective company. But all these companies would do a good job. There's no question about it.
Would I could ask a question? Would you think that all the companies were, even though they would all do a good job, were they all basically comparable? I mean, were they all basically around I thought they were around seemed to be the same ability, the same cost in general.
They were. JMT was obviously the cheapest as far as their consideration in my book, but VCOM had a little different. They were very reasonable. The Baltimore company had the concern that one of the companies that had, and that was I believe that was CNET. That was CTC. That was the one that came up with, if they were going to do a consultation with us regarding a new pole being brought in, they wanted $3,500 to do the analysis on that, which we thought was a little bit high, but overall it came down to about the same price. And they all worked with, and they were all felt that we should be able to get compensation for them through including an ordinance for us to collect the funds for evaluation of it, their evaluation of all the 5G companies. So I think we have a good shot of having this reimbursable, all of our costs, for the most part, most of our costs reimbursable.
All right, I thought I saw Mr. Stevens and Mr. Persinger. Am I wrong there? Mr. Stevens, did you have your hand up for a minute?
I did not.
Okay, Mr. Persinger. Your mic's off, Mr. Persinger.
The dog was barking, so I wanted to make sure that wasn't part of our meeting. We asked the town manager to go back and work with his staff and come back to us with a recommendation, and to interview the potential consultants that were out there, and come back with their best judgment. And I'm willing to back that if that's the sense of the rest of the commissioners. I would be happy with either JMT, I think, or CTC. Those are the two companies when I looked at their proposals who seem to have done the best preparation in terms of describing and understanding the problem that the Dewey Beach faces. There is another complication here, I think, and that is who's really involved in this permitting process. Right now, it's both DelDOT and Dewey Beach. If Dewey Beach had sole permitting authority, I think the conflict of interest issue is potentially moot, I believe, at that point, at least for the most part. You certainly can't change the past, but I think going forward, the issue would be moot. So, I mean, at one of our 2 or 3 meetings ago, we did ask the town manager and the town solicitor to go back and to work with DelDOT and make changes that were, would eliminate this notion of looking at the land at the end of the beach, but would give us sole permitting authority. So, I think we need to sort that out. Sort that issue out as we begin to think about which contractor we want to hire here. So I don't know if others have thoughts about that.
Well, would you like an answer about that from Mr. Townsend? What we've got so far anyway?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, yes.
Mr. Townsend, I'm going to put you on the spot and your mic is off.
Well, thanks for noticing that, Mayor. I was prepared to launch into my remarks.
Go ahead, Mr. Townsend.
So there has been an effort on my part to research and look for some kind of foundation that establishes the location of the right-of-way. And it's not resulted in anything definite. And while I wanted to make every effort not to involve DelDOT in my research of this issue, I ultimately decided I needed to talk to them and had a conference call with Ken Feaster, who you remember is the DAG that serves DelDOT, and also Eric Sebo, who's been the DelDOT point of contact. And what I'm coming away with is, and they're doing some additional work to confirm this, is that in all likelihood, the right-of-way is defined by, it has like a negative definition, meaning it is what is between the private property lot lines, as opposed to something independently defined. We have a promise to get back to each other soon on that question, but that is significant with respect to the proposal that the MOU we have with them be amended to add the additional 8 feet from the end of the streets. So if we're to confirm one way or another that that amending the MOU to add the 8 feet to the maintenance agreement we have with DelDOT at the end of each street is not legally significant, then I'll be in a better position to advise the town about entering into the revised MOU as DelDOT is requesting. So we're getting close to an answer to that question, but I don't have it for you yet.
So as of right now, it's both of us have, if for lack of a better term, veto authority or permitting authority for any poles that go in.
Yes, sir. To the extent that we have any authority, we each have that authority. I mean, it begs the question, how far does the authority go? We know that we have some authority to regulate aesthetics, and we know that the industry is of the belief that if we are imposing any restrictions on them that make it impossible for them to provide coverage on the beach, that those restrictions may have to give way. We don't accept that, but we're still working to try and firm those questions up.
Mr. Persinger, does that answer your question, or?
Well, I mean, only in part. Even if we were to agree to the provision that would provide maintenance authority to DelDOT for that 8-foot section that extends beyond the end of the street, that doesn't affect, as I understand it, wouldn't affect our permitting authority. We could not sign the rest of the agreement and still have permitting authority, or we could sign it and have sole permitting authority. It seems to me that those are separable issues in terms of that MOU. Does that?
Mr. Persinger, I want to interrupt for a minute. I apologize. I let this go on because you linked it in with the ability to choose one of these individual companies. So I want to swing this argument back around to that link, if you would, please.
Well, I mean, it still relates to, the question of sole permitting authority versus continuing to maintain dual permitting authority. It's all part of the same issue. It's a little bit tangential, and I certainly take your point there. I'm getting a little far afield, perhaps, but it's still an issue that needs to be solved. Regarding this whole 5G pole placement issue.
But did that help you? Did his answer help you with your question there?
Well, I mean, it's basically we don't know yet. I think was the answer.
Mr. Townsend wants to make another comment.
Right. I think the issue that Mr. Persinger has is evaluating the significance of what has been described as a conflict of interest and saying, well, if they've got the authority to grant a permit and so do we, and the industry needs a permit from both, then is there a conflict at all? And I think that there isn't much of a I don't think a conflict is really a major issue in selecting JMT or a rival. I don't see that as a big issue for the reason stated by Mr. Persinger that we've got concurrent regulatory authority, in our opinion, even though the authorities are not extremely well defined. I think they're concurrent. I think that whatever time frames apply to acting on a permit, they would run concurrently, so that anyone wishing to construct a pole in Dewey Beach would apply to the town of Dewey Beach and the state of Delaware at the same time, unless we enter into this agreement, at which time only Dewey Beach would have any regulatory authority over that industry.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Mr. Persinger, if that answers your question, I'm going to go to Mr. Stevens, but if it doesn't, then I'm going to come back to you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I do believe the concurrence is there. I agree with that. I don't believe that there's a conflict. I think there's actually a consistency in bringing on JMT. I was a little leery at first because of their involvement, and hearing all of this. If there's no other conversations, Mr. Mayor, can we move towards a motion to approve?
Well, there's at any time somebody can make a motion. So are you making
I would like to make a motion to approve the hiring of JMT as a consulting company to assist with the wireless facilities and 5G placements.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I would like to make a motion to approve the hiring of JMT Consulting to assist with the wireless facility and 5G pole placement and related items.
Is there a second for that motion for discussion?
I'll second.
There's a proper motion and a second to approve JMT. I'll let the maker of the motion and the person who seconded speak first. Mr. Stevens?
I concur with Commissioner Persinger. We asked the town manager and Mr. Dede alike to go away and to come back with their recommendation. I believe that they've vetted it and have come back with a recommendation. And I would like to continue to move forward and get them on board to help us with this process.
Mr. Persinger?
Yeah, I think that the town staff have spent the time that we asked them to make available and to go through the process. They've clearly been a lot closer to it than we have. We've just seen proposals and had a little bit of interaction with a couple of the vendors. With the town solicitor's helpful clarification on the conflict of interest issue, I'm willing to support the hiring of JMT.
Is there any further discussion from anybody? Mr. Bauer?
Yeah, I appreciate what the staff did, and if that's the, if that was the unanimous choice from the staff, I'll go along with that. My only concern with JMT is, they approved polls in the past. Would they have done anything different if they were our consultant, then what's already happened? I mean, I don't know if they would or wouldn't. Is there new information that they have today that they didn't have before? We're looking for someone to help us. I mean, help us navigate this thing. But, I don't know if they've had any examples of where they've been able to successfully turn people down on these things and have it stand. I'm all for hiring a consultant, but I want to get some result out of it as well. I mean, I think we all want a better outcome than we're currently getting. So that's my only concern with it. And Bill, I don't know if you can speak to that, if they addressed that at all, and or Jim, if you want to address that, if they said anything about that. I mean, they were the ones responsible for what we have.
Mr. Bauer, is that a question to Mr.
Yeah, it's a
Zolper?
question for Bill and Jim.
Okay, then I'm going to go to Mr. Townsend after them. Mr. Zolper?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So with Jim when the assistant town manager and the building inspector, when we split this up, I took Vicom, Jim took JMT, and the building inspector took CTC. Because we met several times, a couple of times, talked about it. Then we came back with questions each time. And Jim talked to JMT specifically about this conflict.
Hey, guys, I'm waiting.
Go ahead, Mr. Zolper.
Specifically about the conflict of interest. So we all agreed that was a major issue that we needed to look at.
Right.
So Jim went ahead and recontacted them about the conflict of interest, and that's why there's an addendum there. I went ahead and contacted Bethany Beach, who JMT is working currently for, and spoke with the assistant town manager down there, John Apple. He said as of right now, when I talked to him probably 2.5 weeks ago, they were satisfied with JMT, who's representing both DelDOT down there and them. Now their roads are a little different than ours, so I understand that. So at this point, I'd like, if Jim's available, to make any additional comments.
Mr. Dedes, you've moved around a bit. Now you're available. Your mic is off. Your mic is off, Jim.
Am I on now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, when I talked to Lenny Massetti, yeah, they've had some success, but it's not quite the success that we were hoping to hear from anybody, is that we're going to block them from ever coming in. The issue and their representation with DelDOT really focused on the criteria DelDOT gave them.
Yeah,
Nothing more, nothing less. Didn't get into aesthetics, didn't get into a distance, and didn't get into the analysis of their RF signals and what distance do they have. They just simply followed their criteria. Where they've had some success in Wilmington, and I guess Bethany to some degree, they're just getting started, is they're creating they helped create ordinances that dealt with what they felt was upheld by courts, which dealt with aesthetics and the issue of public safety. Since we have nothing to deal with aesthetics, and we have some issues with distances, they could help us with that. But as far as blocking them, probably not. They haven't had any success, and from their expertise and their consultation with us, they've said very few have actually been able to block them, period, because that's not part of the FCC criteria that you can rule it out. But you have to have something that we can go with, and what they feel they can help us with is their analysis to make sure that they meet all of the FCC rules and regulations, which they said DelDOT didn't get into all those details with the requirements that they asked JMT to follow. So I feel good that they would help us, and we could look at the FCC regulations and help us come up with the aesthetic issues. But blocking it to simply block them, no. Most of the companies that we've dealt with are really working to find a path to let these 5G companies come in, but with the requirements that the community has. So to say that we're going to get a consultant that's going to come up with something to simply say we don't want them in Dewey Beach, I think that's the wrong path we're going to be following.
Thank you, Mr. Dedes. I have a list of people first. Mr. Townsend wanted to speak, and then Mr. Persinger wanted to speak, but we haven't heard from myself or Mr. Jasinski, so then we might go to them first. And Mr. Townsend first.
Yeah, Mr. Didi's just stated the point that I wanted to make, and just to emphasize that a little bit, I think that the contractors here are in a position to provide us with technical assistance, but they're limited by whatever regulation is in place, whatever regulation is being enforced by whichever authority is enforcing it. So DelDOT has a set of regulations or policies or practices or something with regard to the installation of these poles. We may not know exactly what that is. JMT certainly does. But at the time the Verizon poles went in, JMT may have been providing support to DelDOT, but our ordinance wasn't in place yet. And JMT may have done a terrific job in advising DelDOT whether Verizon complied with existing regulations, but JMT has indicated during the course of other meetings, or at least one other meeting that we've had with the council, that they have reviewed our ordinance. They're somewhat familiar with it, and you know, that's the kind of advice I'm looking for. I'm not suggesting that one of these other providers couldn't do the same thing, but I'm looking forward to having some technical expertise available to the town in evaluating these applications.
Well, Mr. Jazinski, you haven't said anything. Did you want to say something? Go ahead first.
Yeah. So, my take on this is if JMT was head and shoulders ahead of these other alternatives in terms of their capability, we might be in a position where we need to do business with them. But it's really a situation where we've got three vendors who are somewhat comparable, and where JMT has an edge is also the biggest problem in that they know Delaware and DelDOT the best. What I go back to is our residents have made very clear to us that they want us to have some fight in this. And I know Fred wants technical assistance and all the firms can provide that, but our residents want us to have some fight. And I believe that a vendor who has a little bit more distance from DelDOT is going to be in a position to help us with the best outcome. That doesn't mean no poles, but that means poles that aren't sitting right in the middle of a walkway to the beach or eastward of the pavement in town, that type of thing. And so I feel since we have an alternative who's comparable, even if they don't know DelDOT as well, that really makes sense for us to give credit to.
Mr. Persinger.
Yeah, this is really in direct answer to Commissioner Bauer's question. That is, I would expect that JMT would actually make a different decision than they made for DelDOT in positioning poles that are there already. DelDOT has no criteria that we're aware of in terms of the distance from a beach entrance, for example. So JMT would come in and look at our criteria. That would be the first part of their task, as I understand it, and make some judgments about those that they believe that we could legitimately pursue and not run into conflict with either state law or federal regulations. So, there's no vendor who's going to be able to promise that we'll be able to stop positioning of any given pole. But we can certainly pursue our criteria. And to the extent that our criteria are different than those that DelDOT works with, I would expect JMT to come up with a different decision, one that's consistent with our criteria and not DelDOT's.
Thank you, Mr. Persinger. I guess I'll have the last word here unless somebody else wants to add additional comments. I'm of the mind, as much as I want to follow through with what our town manager and town hall have recommended, I'm of the mind to vote no to this proposal. I was leaning towards, and I'm still leaning towards ctcnet. Not only because of their phone preparation, not only because of their answers when we interviewed them, but because the final factor that finally dissuaded me, my worry, like David said, my worry about their work for the state, I just feel it finally pushed me over to say that I could not vote for them at the time. So there we have it. Is there any other discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens.
Just one final comment. I don't disagree with any of the other commissioners' point of views, but I do think that it took us time to change our viewpoint on the aesthetics and our controls in terms of what could possibly happen in terms of the permitting process. And if we had that in place prior, we might have had a different viewpoint of JMT at this point in time. So I just like to throw that out there as a concept before we put it on vote.
Okay, then, hearing no other discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the motion to accept JMT's proposal and do a contract with them, say aye.
Aye.
I see two, Mr. Stevens and Mr. Persinger. Those not in favor, say nay.
Nay.
Mr. Bauer, how did you vote?
You're on mute.
Or your mic is off.
All right, nay, sorry about that.
All right. If I see it correctly, then Mr. Jazinski, Mr. Bauer, and Mr. Cook voted nay. Mr. Persinger and Mr. Stevens voted aye.
Can I propose a motion?
Yes, sir, you can.
I'd like to motion that we approve the CTC contract.
There's a motion on the floor to approve ctcnet. Is there
I'll
a
second
second?
that. I'll second.
Second by Mr. Persinger. Is there any further discussion? Or is there any discussion? Mr. Jazinski and Mr. Persinger, would you like to discuss?
I already made my reasoning clear.
All right. Mr. Persinger, would you?
Yeah, I am very comfortable with CTC.
All right, Mr. Bauer?
Yeah, just quick question. I think, Bill, you had met with CTC?
Well, we had the discussion with them, sir, during the commissioners meeting, and then I have emailed and talked to them since then.
Yeah, okay. Are you comfortable with them?
I'm comfortable really with either one of them. The only thing that Vicom had over CTC is that they've done some resorts out along the Atlantic coast, but both of them are offering basically the same service at the same price.
Got it. Okay.
Is
Thank
there
you.
any Go ahead, Mr. Bauer.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I
Mr.
have a
Stevens?
question. Yeah, a question for Mrs. Zolper. When I look at the CTC proposal, I see a flat fee for task number 1, and then I see average cost for task 2 from an application review process. My understanding is that JMT Consulting was capped at 19. Is there any maximum amount of this fee structure, or is there any anticipated? So this could be twice, 2 or 3 times JMT as a possibility?
It could be with both the other companies. That's one of the reasons why we ranked JMT where they were.
And I think it's is it highly possible, or is it? And I know I'm asking for your opinion, which I'm sure I'm glad the solicitor's we're not in court of law, but I just see like a new wireless facility at $3,500 a piece. I'm looking at the contract saying it's co-location at $1,500 per pole. So this could be a very expensive decision because of a perceived conflict. So that's my only point.
Any other discussion on the matter? Okay, all in favor of issuing the award to the CTCnet, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say nay.
Nay.
And any abstentions? Obviously not. Then it comes out, the motion passes. CTCnet will be awarded the contract with a 4-to-1 vote. Ashley, you got that? Thank you. We'll move on to the next item then. Discuss and possibly vote to approve the general fund balance policy. Mr. Persinger, I'd ask you, since all your work was done on this, if you would take the lead on this.
Sure, I will do that. I think as everyone knows, in the last 2 audits, the auditors have recommended that we have a general fund balance policy, which basically means that we should have a policy that says what level of funds we should maintain in the general fund to provide some mitigation against unexpected events, either higher expenditures or lower revenues. And they further recommended that we, whatever policy we come up with, be consistent with the Government Finance Officers Association guidelines. So in terms of the process that we followed, we had a workshop on March the 8th with the town commissioners, the audit, budget, and finance and investment committees to begin development. Had a lot of good discussion. As a result of that, we put together a subsequent discussion among the 3 committee chairs, the 2 commissioner liaisons, myself and Commissioner Stevens, and the town manager and the town's auditors. Out of that meeting, to keep things going, we had quite a range of recommendations in terms of our discussion that we had, ranging anywhere from following the basic Government Finance Officers Association guideline of 2 to 3 months balance in the general fund, up to basically keeping all of the unassigned revenue that we currently have, which is about 9 to 10 months of revenue, and actually trying to grow that balance up to about a year so that we would have a year of funds, maybe even more. That was the basic recommendation that we got from Budget and Finance. So as a result of that discussion, I put together some options. And my intent was, because the auditors had offered to provide us some input as we continued to go through the process, I thought that I would be able to get some feedback from them and then hopefully develop that into some options that we could then circulate with members of the committee and commissioners. The 3 options basically ranged from keeping about anywhere from, say 30 or 40% in the general fund, and then either putting the balance of unassigned money either into maybe a rainy day fund or creating a capital expenditures fund, or perhaps even putting the money into the infrastructure fund. So what came back as a result of the discussion that the town manager then had with the auditors, I was not part of that discussion. It was excuse me, solely between the town manager and the auditors. What they came out of that discussion is really kind of a more concrete suggestion of a policy that we might follow. So what I did was, based on the town manager's report of that discussion, I put together a draft general fund balance policy. And I wanted to be clear that this is Commissioner Persinger's draft. This is in no way a consensus document. I do not have comments from other commissioners. I do not even have comments from the town manager. So we can make this a consensus document if we choose to approve it today. If not, we can go back and continue to work on it. But it has 2 primary components. First of all, is to create an assigned rainy day fund balance that will be equal to about 6 months of operating expenditures. And let me back up just a second to say that it appears, based on the recent financial reports, that we may have anywhere from $2.8, $2.9 million in unassigned funds. So this would take up about 6 months of operating expenditures. The second primary component would be to maintain an unassigned fund balance equal to 15%, or about 2 months of operating expenditures. And that would provide protection against short-term imbalances in revenues and expenditures. Any remaining funds, and we think there would be some, the proposal here would be to put that into a capital improvement fund. So we'd be talking about creating an assigned rainy day balance set at about $1.9 million for FY 2022. That's based on $3.7 million in projected expenditures in total. We would retain the Brown Advisory investment, which is short-term investment, but we could be a bit more flexible with that in terms of the town's investment policy. We could turn that over to the investment committee to come up with some additional options for that money. And then the remaining, let's see, losing my track here. The unassigned balance would then be established at about $600K, which would leave somewhere around $300 to $400K remaining from the current unassigned balance of $3 million. And that could be transferred to an assigned capital improvement fund. So that's an outline. There are obviously lots of ways we could go with that. This is, again, my draft. It's, certainly open to comment, changes, and I will stop there and let others weigh in.
Well, Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. Commissioner Persinger is always very thorough, and one of the reasons I love having him on the commission. As I look at the process we went through, this is not a policy that gets set in stone and put away. It is something that, as a commissioners, we can constantly evaluate, almost a living document. So what Commissioner Persinger has done here is set the ground rules of how do we establish this policy, how do we move forward and look at its effectiveness, and which will allow us to also to target more of a direct approach in terms of our investment strategy. So I just want to say I'm completely a proponent of this.
Mr. Bauer.
Yeah, Gary, thank you very much for all the hard work you did on that. And Bill, I know you were involved as well. But at this point, let's vote on it. I'm ready to make a motion to vote.
You can make a motion at any time. Are you making a motion?
Making a motion to approve as Gary's draft is proposed.
Yeah.
Approve as a general fund balance policy.
Correct.
Is there a second for that? Second by Mr. Jasinski. And then we'll go to discussion. Mr. Bauer, do you have any discussion on it?
Nope.
Mr. Jasinski, do you have any discussion on it?
No, it's very well written. I liked it.
Does anybody else have any further discussion on it?
No.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm probably the only one that's going to freely admit that it went above my head a little bit. I apologize for not responding to you. And this is a hell of a lot of work, and I think it should be approved. So hearing no other discussion, I'll call Mr. Persinger.
I just have one comment. I certainly hope the auditors like
it.
We got your back, Gary.
We're going to find out shortly.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any against, say nay. Any abstentions? Unanimous, Ashley. All right, next item, number 7, discuss and possibly vote to approve an ordinance to amend chapter 153, solid waste of the municipal code of the town of Dewey Beach, Delaware by amending 153-6 violations and penalties. And this was brought forth at the request of the town manager, and I'm going to ask Mr. Zolper to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I was getting numerous phone calls about overflowing trash cans at the end of the streets, and then both on the Dune side and down on Route 1 where the trash cans are. And when I went out on some of those and looked, especially over the weekends, a lot of them appeared to be filled with household garbage. They were in large bags. They had been stuck in, and then of course the people coming off the beach in smaller bags, and then dog waste bags that stuck stuff on top, and the stuff was just blowing all over the place. So I'm trying to figure out how can we get, have people stop doing this. What really has helped is that trash is now being picked up twice a week, but that doesn't solve our problem when this rolls around next year. So I thought if we could add a little more bite into the fines on this, and we would actually put some type of marker on the trash cans, a sticker that would say fines up to $300 for disposal of household trash into these bins. That's why I brought it up, sir.
And how did you come about with the figures for the fine?
So on the advice of the mayor and consultation with the mayor, I went back and saw what $25 was back when this passed the ordinance for the fine. And then I looked what the cost of living was between now and then. And when I looked it up, $100 in 1981-82 is now worth about $300. So that's how I came up with $75 in the following fines.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Mr. Stevens, Mr. Bauer.
Yeah, for town manager, is it the assumption that I guess the only thing that bothers me is the first violation or each file is there any element of a warning to allow the residents to, if they did not or were not aware of this ordinance, or is it immediately first time you do it, it's a $75 fine?
No, it's the first time it's a civil offense. There could be a warning. I guess that could be up to the judgment of whoever's out, myself or our code
Okay.
enforcement. But it states that each violation will be 75 for the first offense, and then 150 for the second offense, and 300 for the third.
Okay.
Mr. Bauer is next.
I'd like the motion to approve this.
Mr. Bauer, I would ask you, would you do me a favor if we could hold the motion, even though if you don't want to, you don't have to. But we had another hand up also. Would you allow us to go to Mr. Persinger before you make the motion?
Sure. I mean, we're going to discuss anyhow, but you've got to have a motion on the floor to discuss, right?
All right, then let's go to the motion, Mr. Bauer. You're correct.
Motion to approve this. Thank you, Bill, for putting this before us.
Second.
And it's been properly motioned and seconded by Mr. Bauer and Mr. Stevens. All right, Mr. Bauer, your comment.
No comments.
Mr. Stevens, your comment.
Long overdue. Nope.
Mr. Persinger, your hand was up.
Yeah, I'm basically just fine with this. Really, the issue is something that Mr. Moskowitz brought up in his public comments. You know, if you read paragraph A of this section, and this is existing code, read very, very literally, you know, if I walk out of my house on Dickinson Street and I have a little bit of trash in my hand and I drop it in the public waste container at the beach entrance, then I'm in violation of this. I don't think there's anybody who's going to enforce it that way. I think, and this also relates, I think, a little bit to some of what Commissioner Stevens was saying as well. I think this is kind of an issue where this is, if you see it, you know it needs to be, if you see something happening like this, you'll know when it needs to be enforced and when it doesn't need to be enforced. So, you know, I think I'm comfortable with that. I don't really think that's an issue. So I'm supportive of this.
Any other comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of passing this ordinance, chapter 153 on solid waste, say aye.
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 Any against, say nay. Any abstentions? Actually unanimous. It goes on to the next item. Item number 9, discuss and possibly vote to reappoint 3 election officials to the Board of Elections. These are renewals that we're requesting for Elaine Bowl as chair, Marty Tarr and Kay Sullivan as members of the Board of Elections. Any comments or motions or?
Yeah, I motion we approve them, all three.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jazinski, seconded by Mr., I guess it was Bauer and Persinger. So.
Either or.
Second by Mr. Persinger. Do you care to discuss either the motion mover or the second?
No.
Anybody else care to discuss? I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any against, nay. Any against, I'm sorry. Any against, say nay. And any abstentions? No, actually unanimous. Item number 10, discuss and possibly vote to add a new member to the Budget and Finance Committee. And that new member is Mr. John Gephardt. You have his bio. Any comments, questions, motions, whatever? Mr. Persinger.
I move that we approve this new member for Budget and Finance.
And is there a second for that motion?
I second.
There's a second from Mr. Stevens. Had 2 hands up and 1 person at second. So Mr. Stevens second. Any comments from Mr. Persinger or Mr. Stevens?
Just a question. Is adding this new member, is it replacing someone on the Budget and Finance Committee? Or is it just simply an addition? And I assume since Mr. Stevens supports this, I assume that the chair does as well. Is that
David,
correct?
Let me look at my notes. Let me just confirm that for you, Gary. I thought this was an addition.
if I remember correctly, he approved it.
Yeah.
Mr. Zolper, is that correct?
Yes, it's an addition.
Yeah, I believe it's an addition.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
And the committee chair is comfortable with this as well, I assume.
Yes.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any against, say nay. Any abstention? Unanimous. Review the April 2021 financial. Mr. Zolper, it's your ball game here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So looking at April, we're in pretty good shape. Revenue expected is 208,878. Actual revenue for April was 488,470. The difference of 290 or 279,592. And Sheena's done a great job keeping track of this, and I'll have her make some comments at the end. Expenses expected in April were 244,993. Actual expenses in April were 223,042. Differences below expect 21,951. Year-to-date expected set-asides 46,218. Actual year-to-date set-aside 66,910. Year-to-date differences expected 47,023. Actual year-to-date differences is 198,518. We are doing pretty well. I'm going to have Sheena quickly talk about parking permits and transfer tax. Sheena.
In August or April, after April's deposit, we're at 28% or about 20% of our year-to-date transfer tax budget. Seeing the numbers that we're going to be getting deposited this month, it's going to put us over 50% of our annual budget for transfer tax in 2 months. So I'm thinking by the end of the summer, it's not going to be much more property in Dewey to sell, but maybe you people want to sell more. At the end of April, in just 2 weeks of April, we were at 18% of our seasonal parking passes sold in the budget. Compared that to 2019, which we started selling the beginning of April, we had sold just 200 passes, and we had sold 330 this month or in April. At 3:40 today, we hit 52% of our seasonal parking budget. Sold. We have sold 920 permits, 622 resident permits, 131 of the employee permits for the local businesses, 176 out-of-town parking permits. We sold $163,000 in seasonal parking permits. When I compared that to 2019, at the same time, we were at only 41%. So we're blowing away, not even thinking about last year. We're doing better than we were 2 years ago. 2 years ago, the parking permits were 150 and 200. So of course our revenue is higher this year, but I compared it to the budget and the total percentage. I'm not saying go and spend everything, but this is looking like it's going to be a really good year for us. They have been lined up 9-10 deep all day long at the window to get parking permits. So office staff has been busting their butt all day long, and it's showing that this town is going to be rocking this summer. And I just thought y'all should know.
Thanks, Sheena. Nice job.
Mr. Zolper, are you finished?
Yes, sir, on the financials.
Mr. Stevens, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to make two very small points to the commissioners. If you were to look at the detail on the financial statements, I think, and Sheena and I did have a conversation, but it was too late to really make a change. And Sheena, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the 17,954 on the IT, isn't that part of is that part of the prior period approval of expenditures?
Right. Normally our contract with T2, who does the parking enforcement, that's the software, comes due in April. Because we have expanded the services, we have had to pay for the first half of the new services, the full plan, plus the whole year of what we would normally do. We still owe for the other half of the new plan, but I have talked them into not making us pay until they get it into effect, because it looks like we're not gonna have to pay the second half if we have to pay any of it.
And my only point is that it's actually a little bit, if you look at just at the administrative, we're actually doing better. It's more of a prepaid
Correct.
rolling out. That was my only comment. It's a good job. Great job, town.
Any other comments? Anybody else have any comments or questions about the financials?
Just one quick comment. That's a phenomenal start for the first 2 months of the year.
Anybody else? Well, I just want to warn people, remember 2008, 2008. It was when everything tanked, and everybody was shocked and surprised. Eventually, this sales boom will come to an end. The town needs to stick to its budget.
Yes, it does.
Please, let's not be all happy we have a lot of money to spend. We better save it for the rainy day. Right, Mr. Persinger?
That's absolutely correct.
All right, we'll move on to next item number 12, town manager comments.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to make this quick. I do have a lot of things. There's a lot of good work going on, but I want to go over the police stats real quick. So police incidents, 114 for April, civil citations, 11, criminal arrests, 6, disorderly conduct, 15, noise complaints, 6, which is good. We don't want to see a lot of noise complaints. Traffic citations, 100, DUI arrests, 4, vehicle accidents, 2, and business checks, 224 business checks, and 65 police assistants. Any questions on that? Code enforcement's numbers for the month of April for total amounts collected was $1,796. Any questions on that?
Is that from past overdue tickets or is that present?
That's past overdue.
Right. And what's their perspective for continuing like that? After a while, it's got to stop, right? I mean, there's only so much you can collect from the past.
Yes, sir. I mean, but we're issuing new tickets at the same time, hopefully this summer, and then it'll continue.
Not that I'm encouraging you to put tickets out. I'm just wondering how much background, how much more is there out there to be caught up from the previous year?
I'll find out and let you know. I'll send something out to all the committees.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, did you have your hand up?
No, I had the same question you had. I was just curious about the total outstanding.
Go ahead, Mr. Zolper.
So tracking the American Rescue Act, received an email from the state on that on May 5th, giving us some updates. There wasn't much to that, but then on May 10th, received another email talking about frequently asked questions and what can small municipalities anticipate. There are some things in there that we can use, as most of you know, for infrastructure and for repaying some overtime that the town expended because of the virus. So there'll be more to come on that. Sheena has gotten us registered for that site, and we're just waiting for additional information to come in. Lifeguards started weekends, May 1st, and they'll go full time. Memorial Day, summer officers started their training. They are graduating this Sunday. We have 14 summer officers, police officers, and 3 dispatchers, 3 part-time dispatchers. We budgeted for 15, but we only got 14 in. Compared to Rehoboth, they're right around 15 also. So I think, we made the right decision on that. Police training that Chief Mackard's been doing based on the Warren report, April 27th with use of force, May 3rd with supervisor management training, and then May 12th with community policing training. We will continue to do the training as the year goes on. We had driver training with Todd Frischman based on the new Gator we got. That was an hour worth of class, and then doing a driving course over at the lifeguard station. Employee of the year was Elaine Bowl. The mayor and I attended that. It was very deserving. She is a true volunteer for the town of Dewey Beach, and we really appreciate that. Crosswalk signs. I got the one down there at King Charles and Chesapeake, and then on busy holidays and busy days when we have functions in towns, you'll see me put those signs out with the police assistants. During like the art festival and some of the other things. I know Ashley's bringing up some pictures now, but there's the one down in King Charles. You can go ahead and move down, Ashley. King Charles again. That's out on Route 1, and it really did help us during the art festival. Could you go down again, Ashley? Again, the 2 signs out there, 3 signs. Okay, go back one, please. Go ahead, go to the next one. These are, so on Tuesday, I was notified by Don that there were 4 big trucks down on Dagsworthy Street. And when I got down there, they were big trucks. They were definitely putting something in. They were going to run fiber to a 5G pole at the end of Dagsworthy Street. They had already done the boreholes, 9 boreholes for those the week before, which nobody knew about. They were going down, they were going to put these boxes in down by the flagpole and then run the cable all the way down the street. I got down there, I said, listen, this hasn't been approved. It's still under review by our attorney. And I got them to stop. They were very accommodating with that, but they did have a permit from DelDOT saying they could put that in. That permit does expire on the 25th of this month. It was issued back in October. But we talked to Verizon, we talked to DelDOT, and there was definitely confusion between Verizon and DelDOT on putting this in. But it is stopped, and they will not be coming back. And again, their permit expires on the 25th. Any questions about that? There's the other picture of their equipment that was down there. Okay, Ashley, if you could move on. We got a lot of the sand cleaned up down on Van Dyke. We spent a good half day down there doing that slide. And this was down on the end of New Orleans Street. I've received multiple complaints about the end of the street down there, not having any blacktop underneath it. I've talked to DelDOT. They're going to come in October and blacktop the last 10 feet down there. And we're moving some of that sand around there now. That's what you see. Also, during the art festival, we raised $600 selling dog licenses out there at the art festival. The mayor and I attended a windmill briefing by U.S. Windmill. Bottom line on that, 2024, they'll be going off of Fenwick and Ocean City, anywhere between 17 and 24 miles out. Somewhere along the East Coast, they may bring a cable in to bring that power into Delaware. But basically, unless the mayor has any other comments on that, that's all we got from that meeting. Correct, Mayor?
That's fine.
This is a picture of our new seasonal police officers going through the training with Captain Warren. Anything else, Ashley? I think that was the last one. Operation Gray Fox, we're going to participate in that. The mayor and I met with the state auditor, Kathy McGinnis. We're going to be one of the pilot programs, towns for that. Basically, we're going to have, they're going to send us a platform. We will go into that platform. We will fill it out. When we receive the money from the American Rescue, when we go ahead and how we're going to use it, we will fill out that platform, and the auditor's office will keep that. They're going to do one small town, they're going to do a mid-size and a large town. And Lewis, I think, also is going to be part of this program. On or about the 26th, they're going to announce it that we're going to be part of this program with the state. I think it's a good thing. It shows transparency where our money is going, and anybody will have access to it to see that. I spoke with Dan Keeney today from Cohen Resnick about the audit. He went ahead and sent out to Luff all the material that he's going to need. We're going to have a conference call with him next week. It'll be myself, Sheena. He wanted just myself, Sheena, and Devon from Luff to start off on that conference call. And pending any questions, that's all I have for the town manager.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the commissioners?
Sorry. That's me.
Messenger.
I did not understand. What's this new program that you're talking about with the state? I completely missed that.
So it's called Operation Gray Fox. It basically, the state auditor, Kathy McGinnis, has asked Dewey to be a test program with some of the other towns. When we get our American rescue money for the virus from the federal government and from the state, we will go into a computer platform that they have set up for us, a website. We will go in and say, we got $190,000. And then every time we go to spend it somewhere here in town, we'll go in and say, hey, we spent $100,000 on stormwater. And we'll put in the all the information on that. It was voted on by the commissioners to spend it that way. Anybody in the town of Dewey, really anybody in the state can go in and check that. It's really about transparency where the money is being spent.
All right, thank you.
That's just strictly a new program by the auditor's office, the state auditor's office. And it just helps citizens throughout the whole state, but in particular in Dewey, be able to pull it up and show exactly where we spent that money. And supposedly, if it works right, not going to take any additional steps on the part of our employees. So, go ahead, Bill.
Oh, that's it, pending any questions.
Any other questions? Anything at all? Ashley, was there anybody else that was on the line that I didn't think there was? You would have yelled at me if there was, believe me. So I appreciate that. And we'll go on to commissioners' comments. Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, well, first off, I want to thank everybody at Town Hall. They're doing a phenomenal job, and yeah, but I can't say enough good things here about our new town manager. How many days is it, Bill?
We're going to fourth month.
But the amount of work you've done in that short period of time is really phenomenal. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And I think Ashley is expecting a baby here pretty soon. So I'm not sure when we're going to see Ashley for a while, but we'll miss her. We'll get by hopefully, and we'll see her soon.
In between grunts, she'll be online.
We'll try not to bug you too much, Ashley. But on a serious note, we've all received a lot of emails about parking, and I think we need to do something with this. And it's an ordinance we have in place as far as defining where parking exists. I'm not sure how to do this, but we want to get a referral somehow to P&Z to take a look at this thing here for us. And, we have to observe the law, but if the law is wrong, then we need to change the law. So, and I think that's the correct process to do, is have P&Z look at this. And let's whatever definitions we come up with, at least we're doing it all publicly and in the open, and people can participate in it. So I'd like to see that happen. Our next meeting is not for, another 4 weeks. So I don't know, can we refer something to P&Z prior to that or no?
I just remind you, I'm not going to try to stop you from asking questions, but this is a comment section.
I know.
And Fred, I will ask him at the end to address that item, whether it belongs in P&Z or not.
Okay. Yeah, that's my only question on it, but I think it needs to be done. And I think we're probably all in agreement that it needs to be done. So the faster we do it, I think the better off we'll be. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Commissioner Jasinski.
Mute.
The mic is off, sir.
Sorry, I had to have the dog protector on there. I just wanted to thank, all the town staff, the police, administration, everything. The town's really humming. Things seem to be working really well. And I just wanted to compliment everybody on the job everybody's doing.
Thank you. Mr. Persinger.
Yeah, I have one thing. The town each year is required to report to the state on progress toward implementing the comprehensive plan. And I got an email this afternoon from Jim Dedes about that. He forwarded an email from Dorothy Morris at OMB at the state. There's a questionnaire that has to be filled out, and it goes back to the Office of State Planning Coordination. And it's due by July 1st. So there is plenty of time. I bring this up today just because if any commissioners have any input, if there's something, some progress that they have seen with respect to the comprehensive plan that they would like to make sure that gets included in that report to the state, please get back to Jim. I think Jim is going to reach out to planning and zoning on this issue as well. And, we may also want to involve the comprehensive plan committee on this. We need to take a closer look at that. But, once this data all goes back to the Office of State Planning Coordination, and then it goes into an October annual report to the governor that highlights all the community's accomplishments and progress toward implementing their comprehensive plan. So, it's important to do this, and unfortunately, it won't be too much more time before we actually have to come back and do the 5-year revisit on the comp plan. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stevens.
No comment.
All right. And I promised Mr. Bauer that I would ask this question of Mr. Townsend before I go to mine, and it's something that we all need to understand. Mr. Townsend, is the placement of lines or the enforcement of a parking regulation something that is in P&Z?
So the quick answer to that, I think, is no, because
I'm
it's
sorry,
not.
what?
No, I don't think it is. P and Z is to offer a recommendation on amendments to the zoning code and to zoning designations for different properties. There is a parking ordinance in our code of ordinances that regulates, when, what's a lawful or unlawful parking requirement, or not parking requirement, but parking, whether your car has its wheels beyond the line or something like that. But is the question whether we're going to require parking places, additional parking places off street? Is that the question?
No, what's happening is that the town is, at the request of the town manager, the town maintenance is painting stripes on the roadway,
Mhm.
showing where people should not park, meaning in front of driveways and around corners, et cetera. Is that something that should be referred to P and Z if the commissioners want a change?
No, sir.
Okay,
No.
and it's something that we should discuss amongst ourselves. Is that correct?
Well,
Meaning in a public meeting.
well, I mean, to the extent that you all as a council supervise the town manager, then you could discuss it at a meeting. Or you task the town manager from time to time to do projects. So in that sense, or those two senses, it would be appropriate for you to discuss it at a meeting.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Mr. Bauer, does that answer that question for you?
It does. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to address it and.
Okay, I agree. I agree. Now, the final comment from myself, I think it's very important that we deal with our property owners in a proper way. And I think sometimes we don't always do that correctly. And I blame myself for that most of the time, and blame changeover and staff for it other times. We can't always question and change decisions that we don't like that the town manager make. The town manager runs the day-to-day operation. This is all my opinion, but the town manager runs the day-to-day operation of the town, and we need to support that unless there's something absolutely egregious. And, if we have comment from property owners about any item, we should bring those comments to the town manager and let him address them. It is not a P&Z issue about lines drawn on the street. It is something that if commissioners want to address it, the mayor or 3 commissioners can request a meeting at any time, or we can bring it up at the next town meeting. So I wish everybody good luck, and I have no more to say. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.